At night, a traffic accident occurred. One car was hanging off the edge of a bridge. The driver of the other car was unharmed. However, when the firefighter rescued him, he smelled a strong odor of alcohol on him. The car was also filled with empty beer cans. The cop immediately took him aside and said he would handle it. At this time, the situation of the car on the bridge was dire. Seeing this, Casey rushed over and temporarily held the car with their weight. Then they propped up the car with wooden blocks, then stabilized the car with a stabilizer. Afterwards, they removed the front windshield, planning to rescue the person from there. At this moment, Casey glanced inadvertently and found that the drunk driver was gone. Casey hurried forward to inquire.
Where's the driver?
Some officers took him to the hospital.
Seeing the cop being evasive, Casey sensed something was wrong. He immediately looked into the car. Sure enough, as expected, all the empty beer cans had been taken away. At this time, the cop finally told the truth. It turned out that the drunk driver was actually Detective Voight's son. He was a notorious dirty cop in Chicago. Casey looked at the seriously injured victim, then at the arrogant Detective Voight. He had already made up his mind. The next day at work, the fire station received a donated TV, signed by Detective Voight. Unaware of the situation, the team was thrilled. But facing Lieutenant Casey's stern refusal, they had no choice but to return it. The father, discharged with minor injuries, brought a cake to thank the firefighters and also delivered some infuriating news. The police had charged him with running a red light and causing the accident. The man knew something was definitely wrong, but he was kind of at a loss in terms of how to fight it. He said he had no choice but to seek help from the fire station. Asking them to testify, Detective Voight's tactics were too underhanded, turning his drunk driving son into the victim, so Casey didn't hesitate any longer. He wrote this in the accident report.
Visibly drunk, smelled alcohol on his breath. Saw open containers on the passenger seat.
Seeing Casey ready to take the lead, the chief showed him to stand and extended his hand. As their hands clasped tightly, the chief became his solid support. On that night, Detective Voight came to see Casey himself. He invited Casey to a bar, confessed that his son had a criminal record. If charged with DUI again, he would face at least 10 years in prison. He hoped Casey could withdraw the report and said he would owe Casey a big favor. However, thinking of the paralyzed victim, who would also bear false charge, Casey refused on the spot. Then the detective bared his fangs.
I'm not asking!
If you're not the kind of man to do a cop a favor, I can take this to the next level real easy.
Fortunately, the chief appeared midway, so he did not continue to threaten. From that day on, Detective Voight was always haunting. Even when the firefighters gathered for dinner, his figure flashed by. The next morning, just as Casey started work, his car tires were slashed, the windows were smashed, and his wallet was gone. He knew it was Voight's doing. That very night, Voight came to Casey himself, claiming he had caught the thief who stole the wallet. But Casey found an extra $10,000 in the return bag.
This isn't mine. Well, the kid must have stashed it. All you gotta do is change that report.
I'm not gonna do that.
Casey left the money in the car. That night, Voight stopped Casey's girlfriend, threatening her to send a message to her boyfriend, not to be ungrateful.
I'd really hate to see things get uglier than they already are.
After Voight left, the girl was trembling with fear. When Casey learned his girlfriend had been threatened, he stormed into the police station alone, directly confronted Detective Voight in his office, warning him to stay away from them.
I'm not some scared banger begging for a look the other way. I'm not retracting my statement. Ever.
Watching Casey leave, Voight decided to teach him a lesson. That day, while Casey was walking down the street, he was suddenly ambushed by two masked men. As a firefighter, Casey was in great shape, but he was outnumbered. Eventually, he was beaten to the ground. Luckily, he only suffered minor injuries. It seemed like a warning. Later that night, his girlfriend was also targeted. When Casey arrived at the scene, he found the tires slashed and the window shattered. Faced with his girlfriend's inquiries, Casey was filled with rage. He followed Voight under the cover of night, silently gripping his fire axe. Just as he was about to act, the chief appeared and stopped him. He told Casey to stay rational. Voight was just waiting for him to slip up. Casey had to swallow his anger for now, but Voight's tactics were far from over. His girlfriend was frightened and suggested they leave town for a while, but Casey disagreed. While they were arguing, two cops knocked on the door.
We have a warrant to search your home. We got a tip says you're in possession of cocaine.
Hearing the conversation outside, his girlfriend hurriedly checked the house and found something under the dining table, but the cops had already entered. In a moment of panic, she hid the thing behind her. Casey explained that he was a firefighter and his girlfriend was a doctor. There was no way they'd do such thing, but the cops were clearly prepared without any choice. Casey said he had a detective friend named Antonio Dawson who could vouch for their innocence. He dialed the number and handed the phone to the officer. After conversation,
he says they're clean.
If I ever have to come back here again, no favor is gonna get you out of it.
After the cops left, his girlfriend then revealed what she had hidden and quickly flushed it down the toilet. By the time she came back out, Casey had already driven off to confront Voight. He knocked on Voight's door and punched him as soon as it opened, followed by another punch that knocked Voight down. He warned Voight that if he kept up his tricks, he would kill him, but Voight, lying on the ground, pulled out a gun from his pant leg. Casey was stunned if he was shot here. Voight could easily frame it as self-defense, but Voight knew he couldn't kill Casey if Casey died. The DUI report on his son would never be withdrawn. He threw the gun to Casey.
You retract that statement against my son, or you pull that trigger. That's the only thing that's gonna stop me.
Casey was momentarily confused. He wanted to end this once and for all, but doing so would ruin him too. With no better solution, he retreated for now. However, a fire incident would soon change everything. Casey risked his life to rescue a mother and son from an 8-story building. The man was a local gang leader. He quickly recognized Casey. He was the firefighter who has gone up against Voight. As Casey was about to leave, the man called out to him.
Man, I can help you out.
That night, the man privately contacted Voight, saying he had heard from his boys that Voight had a grudge against a firefighter, offering $500 just to beat him up.
Figure I could do a lot worse for a grand.
Bro, you stop him for good, I'll give you 2.
However, the man was wearing the wire. With the evidence obtained, cops immediately moved in. Detective Voight was finally arrested. Though he was a father, he was also a cop. Those who abuse the law will ultimately face justice.